On that freezing, silent night, as the Titanic fired its distress rockets into the dark sky, there was another ship on the horizon. Its lights were visible. It was close enough to help, but it never moved. It just watched. Why did it stay silent? And what secrets did the ocean swallow that night? Tonight, we journey into the calm, dark waters of history. Relax your mind and let the story begin. Good evening. Sink into your pillow. Let the weight of the day drift away, and let the gentle current of history carry you into the quiet dark. Tonight, we begin a journey not just across the frigid sea, but through the deep currents of fate itself. Our subject is a name that echoes with unparalleled majesty and tragedy: Titanic. But before we ever reach that steel behemoth of 1912, we must drift back in time, 14 years before the tragedy, to the year 1898. We begin with a prophecy, written in the quiet desperation of a struggling man who created a fiction that would become a haunting reflection of fact. The unsinkable dream of a fictional titan. In the fading light of the 19th century, a writer named Morgan Robertson, a man who knew the sea and its moods intimately, published a novella. It was called Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan. The tale itself was somber, heavy with the theme its title proclaimed. It described the launch of the largest vessel ever constructed by man, an engineering marvel, a floating city, a testament to human pride. Robertson named his fictional creation simply The Titan. Imagine that book now, resting on a dusty shelf, its pages brittle, its contents a shadow anticipating a future reality. As you settle deeper, listen to the eerie whispers that connect this paper ghost to the metal giant that would later sail. Robertson's fictional ship, the Titan, was gargantuan, one of the first built with triple screws, capable of speeds that defied the norms of the North Atlantic crossing. It was deemed, in the language of hubris that only the Gilded Age could invent, unsinkable. The very word hummed with arrogance. The tragedy he wrote, the cold, inevitable end of the Titan, occurred in the North Atlantic on a cold, moonless night, April. The ship, rushing through the dark at full speed, struck an iceberg, a glancing blow that became a fatal wound. The similarities, when the world finally looked back in horror years later, were chilling. They were not mere echoes, they were precise structural rhymes. Robertson's fictional Titan was almost the exact length and displacement of the real Titanic. His Titan had 3 propellers, the real Titanic had 3 propellers. His Titan was sailing in April, the real Titanic sank in April. The Titan of the novel and the Titanic of history both perished after colliding with an iceberg on the starboard side at high speed near midnight. This wasn't just a story, it felt like a blueprint, a slow, chilling whisper of a disaster yet to come. It leaves us with a quiet, lingering question. Was this foresight, or merely the grim predictability of human pride facing the unforgiving ocean? Perhaps, as Robertson named his tale, it was simply the inevitable consequence of futility, the vain attempt to conquer nature itself. Let that thought settle around you now. The idea of destiny, written, bound, and published 14 years before the vessel of fate even touched water. Southampton, April 10th, 1912. The Grand Assembly. Now let us move forward into the cold, gray morning of April 10th, 1912. The fictional prophecy is long forgotten, irrelevant. The reality is here, anchored at the White Star Line's berth in Southampton, England. The RMS Titanic. Close your eyes and try to perceive the sheer magnitude of this moment, not with the eye, but with the senses. The air itself is thick, heavy with the smell of industry and the sea. You can taste the salt carried inland on a sluggish breeze, mixed with the acrid, metallic scent of coal dust. Tons upon tons of it shoveled deep into the ship's belly, fuel for the dream. The sky is the color of old pewter, a dull, indifferent canvas over this extraordinary display of human engineering. The docks are a symphony of muted activity. The quiet, steady rhythm of ropes creaking, the muffled shouts of dockhands, and the distant cavernous rumble as luggage heavier than most people's entire lives is loaded into the holds. But the sound that dominates, the sound that vibrates in the chest, is the ship itself. It does not look like a ship. It looks like a segment of a floating city, a massive, unmoving cliff face of painted steel towering over the dock workers, over the trains, over the very buildings of Southampton. She is so vast, so impossibly long, that the eye struggles to take her in whole. Her four enormous funnels, tilted back slightly for a purposeful, rakish air, pierce the gray sky like the columns of some new metallic temple. The reality of her name Titanic is earned not by hyperbole, but by simple, overwhelming fact. She embodies the age of colossal ambition. Look up now, way up, past the dark, polished hull, past the endless rows of riveted plates. See the private promenades of the first-class suites, glassed in against the ocean wind, already filled with soft, warm light from within. These are the castles of the industrial age, traveling not across the water, but on it. The passengers arrive in slow, steady streams, an entire society shuffling itself aboard. In the first class, they move with the quiet, unquestioned confidence of people for whom the world has always made way. the women in their elegant, heavy coats and broad hats, the men in their tailored woolens, their faces reflecting the cool assurance of accumulated wealth and status. They are settling into the grand lounges, ready to discuss business and dismiss the rough world outside the plate-glass windows. In second class, there is a bustle of anticipation, a sense of excited gratitude. These are the teachers, the journalists, the small business owners, the aspiring middle class, who view this voyage not as an inconvenience, but as a thrilling, once-in-a-lifetime indulgence. They are happy to be here, to share in the ship's grand promise. And below, deep in the ship's lower decks, where the smell of brine and machinery is strongest, the third-class passengers gather. They are the hopeful ones, carrying their few precious belongings, bundled against the dockyard cold, looking up at the ship with a mixture of awe and nervous resolve. For them, this is the ship of passage, the steel bridge to a future they desperately hope will be better. They are not merely traveling to New York, they are moving toward America, to a new life. A true migration of spirit and body. The weight of the word, unsinkable. As the final hours tick down before the great ship is slated to pull away from the continent, one word hangs in the chill, salty air like a silent promise and a cruel irony. The word that Robertson had used in his fiction, the word that the shipbuilders of Harland and Wolff were so certain of, unsinkable. It is spoken in casual tones, a statement of fact, not hope. The ship has 16 massive watertight compartments. The engineers boasted that even if 4 of these were flooded, the ship could remain afloat indefinitely. The design itself was the proof. This ship was not merely strong, it was a fortress against the sea. And this certainty, this absolute belief in the superiority of their creation, is the heaviest part of the atmosphere at Southampton that morning. It lends a distinct weight to the experience, a sense of finality and security. There is no anxiety on board, no fear. There is only the quiet expectation of luxury and speed. Captain Edward J. Smith, a man known as the Millionaire's Captain, stands ready on the bridge. He is a large man, with a weathered, reassuring face and a beard that speaks of decades spent mastering the ocean. This voyage, the maiden voyage of the greatest ship ever built, is slated to be his last before a comfortable retirement. A perfect capstone to a perfect career. A safe passage guaranteed by steel and mathematics. But standing beside the towering hull, amidst the noise and the certainty, one can feel a deeper, unsettling stillness. It is the stillness that precedes a tremendous event, the quiet before the true storm, or perhaps the deafening silence of destiny pulling its strings. It is the feeling of colossal power moving toward an equally colossal limit. The final gangplank is secured, the last whistle blows, a deep, mournful sound, like a giant sigh released into the cold air. The ropes are cast off. Slowly, agonizingly, the ship begins to move. The sheer inertia of 46,000 tons of steel is overwhelming. The Titanic pulls away from the dock, not with a sudden rush, but with the steady, measured dignity of an unstoppable force. The water between the ship and the pier begins to churn slowly, a dark, bruised green. As the ship eases out into the Solent, the sound of the crowds on shore diminishes, replaced by the low, insistent rumble of the engines, already deep within her belly. It is the sound of the Dream setting sail. She passes the New York, moored nearby, and the suction created by her vast displacement is so great that the smaller vessel is torn from its moorings, the two ships nearly colliding before tugboats drag the New York out of danger. It is a brief, violent spasm of warning, an unexpected moment of chaos in the otherwise precise departure. A tiny shudder of near disaster, immediately forgotten, dismissed as a minor incident. The Titanic steams on out of the sheltered waters of the harbor, past the Isle of Wight and into the open sea. She is pointing west toward the Promised Land, carrying within her 2,224 souls, a mountain of human ambition, and a 4-penny paperback novel's dark, unsettling premonition. The sun begins to set now, or perhaps the clouds simply deepen, masking the light. The great ship glides, silent and immense, toward the gathering dark. She is now nothing but a moving pattern of lights on the vast, indifferent horizon of the Atlantic. The sea is open before her, cold, deceptively calm, and waiting. The first chapter of the crossing is complete. The ship is at sea. The prophecy is set in motion. The great, unsinkable vessel is alone in the vast emptiness. Let the stillness of the ocean settle upon you now and rest.
Chapter 2: The Glassy Sea and the Phantom Horizon. Welcome back to the quiet dark. Draw a deep, slow breath and feel the stillness of the night closing in around you. The great ship Titanic is now fully committed to the ocean. The sounds of Southampton, the cheers, the whistles, the final farewells have long since faded into the vast indifference of the deep Atlantic. For 3 days, the journey has been a symphony of luxury and speed, a floating palace making its effortless way west. As we drift toward the night of April 14th, we must turn our attention away from the ship itself and look instead to the water that holds it. It is the most beautiful yet most sinister element of this entire tale. The sea, like polished glass. The ocean, on the evening of the sinking, was not the angry, churning mass that sailors knew and respected. It was something far more unnerving, far more rare. It was utterly, completely still. Imagine the sea as a boundless sheet of dark, polished glass. On this night, the surface of the North Atlantic lay flat, unwrinkled by wind. The water was so calm, so frictionless, that it did not reflect the darkness. It absorbed it. It became a velvet void. The sailors have a name for an ocean like this. They call it a glassy sea, or a mill-pond sea. For the passengers inside the warm glow of the ship, it meant a smooth, gentle passage. For the officers on the bridge, however, it carried a cold, primal dread. Why? Because the sea is a messenger, and on a night like this, the messenger falls silent. In normal conditions, the constant wind and waves cause the ocean to foam and churn. When an iceberg, that immense floating mountain of ancient compressed ice, is near, the waves break against its base, throwing up a line of white foam. This white line, the telltale fringe of breaking water, acts as a natural tripwire. It is the visual warning that allows lookouts to spot the menace miles away. But tonight, there were no waves. There was no foam. Any iceberg, no matter how immense, would simply rise up out of the flat, dark water like a silent, submerged rock. There would be no white line of warning, no contrast to betray its presence. The surface of the ocean and the bottom of the sky blurred into a seamless, starless dark. It was a perfect, velvety camouflage for the assassin that was already drifting in the ship's path. The calm, which felt like a blessing of weather, was, in truth, the final, fatal piece of the trap. The serenity of the sea became the greatest peril. Breathe slowly. Feel the deep, heavy silence of that calm, moonless night. The phantom horizon and the cold mirage. Adding to this eerie stillness was another layer of atmospheric trickery born of the extreme cold. The Titanic had sailed into a region where the air temperature had sharply dropped, thanks to the proximity of the Greenland ice floes. This created a phenomenon known as a thermal inversion. Cold air, radiating off the ice, hugged the surface of the water, while a layer of relatively warmer air rested just above it. When light passes through layers of air at different temperatures, it bends, causing powerful optical illusions or mirages. Imagine yourself now, high up in the crow's nest, straining your eyes against the terrifying vacuum of the night. Normally, you can see the true horizon, where the sky meets the water. But on this night, the light bending caused the horizon line to appear higher than it truly was. It created a phantom horizon. The effect of this thermal inversion, as historians and meteorologists later determined, was to create a shimmering, distorting barrier. Any object floating low on the water, such as the massive black base of an iceberg, would appear compressed, lower, and visually merged with the dark surface. It was as if the horizon itself was pressing down, concealing anything low to the waterline. The iceberg, therefore, was not merely hard to see, it may have been rendered visually invisible by the natural physics of the atmosphere. The very laws of light and temperature conspired against the lookouts. It is a profound thought. The tragedy was not only caused by a mistake in navigation, but by the deceit of the atmosphere, making the invisible deadly. Let us move now to the bridge of the Titanic, sometime after 10:30 p.m. on that fateful Sunday night. The ship is running smoothly, slicing through the mill pond surface at nearly 22 knots, a breathtaking speed for a vessel of this size. The air on the bridge is bitterly cold, carrying the dry, metallic edge of the approaching ice field. The wind, which feels faster than it actually is, whistles softly through the rigging wires, a faint, monotonous, high-pitched song that is the only deviation from the deep engine thrum below. You can sense the atmosphere of quiet confidence, perhaps bordering on complacency. There are numerous ice warnings, 5 messages received and transcribed, but the officers believe they have navigated successfully past the danger zone. The night is so clear, the sky so brilliant and sharp, stars that seem impossibly close, that a sense of security prevails.
Second Officer Lightoller stands watch, his breath curling away like smoke in the bitter air. He is a careful, meticulous man, yet even he notes the unnerving clarity of the atmosphere in his later testimony. Everything is too sharp, too defined, but the most important thing, the sea's movement, is missing. In the crow's nest, high above the main deck, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee are shivering through their watch. They have no binoculars, a small oversight back in Southampton, a missing piece of equipment, now a point of tragic historical irony. They must rely solely on their own sight, piercing the impenetrable blackness. The darkness here is absolute. There is no moon. The stars, countless and glittering, cast no light upon the water. They only serve to emphasize the void below. As the minutes tick slowly toward the midnight hour, the ship holds its course and its speed. There is a deeply hypnotic rhythm to the great ship's movement. The smooth glide, the steady vibration of the engines, the distant muffled sound of music and laughter rising from the first-class lounges far below. A world of warmth and assurance, separated by mere feet of steel from the indifferent, cold blackness outside. And then, just before 11:40 p.m., in the perfect, fatal silence of the glassy sea, the deception ends. Frederick Fleet strains his eyes against the cold, his gaze moving slowly across the phantom horizon. For a fraction of a second, in that absolute blackness, he sees a subtle shift in the star-patterned sky. A dense, dark mass. Not a wave, not a light, but a sudden absence of stars. A shape slightly darker than the surrounding night. A shadow rising silently from the polished, black water. He slams the ship's bell 3 times, the warning for danger ahead. He grabs the phone and utters the chilling, history-making phrase to the officer on the bridge. "Iceberg, right ahead." The word rings out in the quiet of the bridge, a sudden sharp intrusion into the long, confident journey. The cold, atmospheric spell is broken. The ship is enormous, heavy, and traveling too fast. The turning response is slow, agonizingly slow. The bow begins to swing, but not quickly enough. The iceberg, that ancient piece of frozen darkness, scrapes along the starboard side of the hull. It is not a dramatic, grinding crash, but a muffled, deep shudder that runs through the length of the ship. Many passengers sleep through it, imagining only a minor tremor, perhaps a wave breaking hard against the side. The sound is more like a piece of cloth being ripped, or a low, resonant scrape of metal on metal, a vibration felt deep in the bones of the ship. It is a wound inflicted in silence, under the cover of the blackest night and the calmest sea. In the minutes that follow, the ship continues on its course, seemingly unharmed, yet the damage is done. The sea, the deceitful, mirrored sea, has delivered its silent, fatal blow. The Titanic has struck the phantom horizon. Let that heavy sense of quiet inevitability sink in now. The dream is turning cold. Rest now in the deepest part of the night. Chapter 3. The ship that watched, the SS Californian. The silence is the heaviest thing now. After the deep, resonating shudder of the collision, a fragile, almost unnatural quiet descends upon the Titanic. The immediate aftermath is characterized not by chaos, but by bewilderment. Deep in the ship's structure, the icy Atlantic is already pouring through the ripped plates. But on the surface decks, the world seems almost normal. There is only a slight, perceptible list, a subtle shift in the angle of the deck that feels more like a momentary awkwardness than a death sentence. The passengers are emerging from their warmth, dressed in their finery or their robes, curious about the strange stop in the middle of the night. They are told there is no danger, that there has been a minor accident, and that the great, unsinkable ship is perfectly secure. But high on the bridge, the officers know the truth. The reports from the carpenter and the mail clerks below are grim, delivered with quiet, trembling certainty. 5 compartments filled. The ship, designed to stay afloat with 4, has been fatally wounded. The clock has started. They have perhaps 2 hours. And it is at this very moment, in this fragile window between shock and full realization, that a new element enters the darkness. A light on the horizon. The mysterious star on the water. Imagine the scene from the perspective of the Titanic's bridge. The black, black water, the brilliant stars overhead, and off the port bow, resting low on the water, a set of masthead lights. It is a ship. Not a shadow, not a mirage, but the clear, undeniable presence of another vessel, halted, perhaps, by the same massive ice field that has just claimed the Titanic. The distance is difficult to judge in the absolute darkness, but it feels close, perhaps 6 to 10 miles away, close enough to see, close enough to signal, close enough to save. The officers on the Titanic immediately grasp the terrible irony of their situation. The greatest ship in the world, sinking on her maiden voyage, yet with a potential rescuer visible to the naked eye. They begin to signal using the powerful Morse lamp on the bridge. Short, urgent flashes of light piercing the night, aimed directly at the stationary masthead lights. The message is clear. We have struck iceberg. We are sinking. Please assist. But the distant light, the ghostly observer on the horizon, makes no reply. It simply watches. As the minutes pass and the desperate reality of the situation settles like the fog of the sea, the Titanic resorts to a more dramatic, universally understood sign of distress. Rockets. White rockets fired straight up into the frozen air. They burst high above the ship, blooming into balls of brilliant, dazzling white light before fading and plunging into the cold ocean. They are not the red or green flares of communication. They are the pure, searing white of absolute emergency. The Titanic fires 8 of these rockets over the next hour and a half. Each one is a silent, spectacular plea for life, a heartbreaking visual pulse of hope exploding against the inky canvas of the night. And each time the ship on the horizon remains still. The lights do not change course. They do not move. They do not come. The sleeping giants of the SS Californian. Now let us shift our focus and drift quietly across the 6 miles of intervening ocean to the deck of that mysterious ship. The SS Californian, a smaller, less opulent vessel than the Titanic, was sailing from London to Boston. Several hours earlier, Captain Stanley Lord, an experienced, methodical officer, had wisely decided to stop for the night. The Californian was deep in a thick field of pack ice, icebergs too numerous and dense to safely navigate at night. At 10:21 p.m., the Californian's own wireless operator, Cyril Evans, had tapped out a warning to any ship listening. "Say, old man, we are stopped and surrounded by ice." This warning was so close, so immediate, that it broke into the ears of the Titanic's operator, Jack Phillips, who was overworked sending out messages for wealthy passengers. Phillips, annoyed by the interruption, curtly flashed back, "Keep out! Shut up! I am working Cape Race." Evans, his duty done, switched off his wireless and went to bed.
The Californian was now utterly death to the world. Captain Lord, who, having ordered his ship stopped, also retired. He left instructions for his officers to maintain watch and to call him if anything unusual occurred. The Californian had done the responsible thing. It had halted, but in doing so, it had sealed its own isolation. It is now 11:40 p.m., the moment of impact. The Californian is silent and still. On the Californian's bridge, however, the officers of the watch are wide awake, observing the stillness of the night. They see the ship. Second Officer Herbert Stone and Apprentice James Gibson are on duty. They clearly observe the lights of a large steamer approaching from the south, traveling at speed before it suddenly stops. This is the Titanic. Later, when the Titanic begins to fire its rockets, the Californian's officers see them. Distinct white flashes, one after another, rising high and descending into the cold ocean. They are not the red or green flares of communication. They are the white of absolute emergency. Apprentice Gibson notes the rockets, and Officer Stone attempts to signal the ship with the Morse lamp, the same lamp the Titanic is using to signal them. The Californian sends flashes of light asking, "What is the matter?" They receive no reply. This is the central, heartbreaking question of the mystery. Why did the Californian's officers not realize what they were seeing? Officer Stone later explained that the rockets appeared to be purely white, which in the White Star Line regulations could sometimes signify company recognition signals or merely celebratory flares, not necessarily distress. They did not appear to be the...
More crucially, the officer of the watch and the apprentice simply did not believe the enormous vessel before them could possibly be in danger. The idea was too absurd, too impossible. The ship was not listing dramatically, and the silence of the radio meant there was no urgency. They concluded the ship was either a tramp steamer having a private signal party, or perhaps a ship firing company recognition lights. Captain Lord was woken twice that night and informed of the rockets. He asked his officers, "Are they distress signals?" He was told no, they appeared to be white lights without any explosive report and were being fired low. Based on this information, and perhaps the heavy sense of security that came with being surrounded by ice, Captain Lord remained in his bunk. A ship of 46,000 tons was sinking 6 miles away, and the closest vessel was standing still, its captain asleep, its officers confused, and its wireless silent. Now bring your attention back to the decks of the Titanic. It is past 1 a.m. The list is unmistakable now. The elegant carpeted hallways are tilted, and the grand staircase looks slightly off-center. The initial calm has curdled into a cold, profound unease. The lifeboats are being lowered. They are being lowered half empty, not due to a lack of bravery,
but due to a lack of belief. The passengers still cannot fully accept that they must trade the warmth and safety of the unsinkable ship for a fragile wooden shell in the terrifying darkness. They look over the rail, down at the lifeboat being lowered, and then across the water to that light, that distant, silent light. Imagine the faces, pale in the cold, their eyes locked onto that fixed point of potential rescue. They know someone is there. They know they have been seen. Every white rocket that explodes above them promises salvation, yet the ship never moves. The emotional burden of this specific detail is almost unbearable. It is not the terror of isolation, it is the terror of being ignored. It is the feeling of screaming across a crowded room and being met with a vacant stare. For those on the Titanic, the light on the horizon becomes a terrible, mocking symbol of human indifference, or perhaps human error. It is hope offered and hope withdrawn, all in a silent, agonizing vigil. The officers on the Titanic continued to signal until the final minutes, but the Californian remained a phantom, a ship that watched, yet never sailed toward the screams. The tragedy of the Californian is the tragedy of assumption. The assumption that a ship this size could not sink, the assumption that white rockets meant anything but the most dire distress, and the assumption that one's own comfortable safety was the only reality. Captain Lord would later claim that the ship he saw was much further away and perhaps another smaller vessel, but the evidence, the testimony of his own crew, and the position of the Californian in the ice field painted a devastating picture of proximity and neglect. They had been closer than any other ship. They had watched the rockets, and they had done nothing. The light of the Californian would eventually disappear from the Titanic's view as the great ship settled lower into the water, its own lights dimming and going out. It was a final, chilling symbol of the world turning away, of salvation missed by a distance of only a few miles and a terrible failure of human judgment. Let the cold, quiet stillness of that agonizing wait settle over you now. The sea is black, the lights are gone, and the mystery of the ship that watched remains unsolved in the quiet, empty night. Rest deeply now. The deepest night is over.
Chapter 4. The Last Waltz and the Freezing Stars. Close your eyes. The noise of the collision is long gone. The shouts of the officers are muffled by distance and the rising water. What remains now, in the final hour of the Titanic, is a terrible, beautiful quiet, broken only by a sound that defies the darkness. It is the sound of music. As the great ship settles lower, its massive, elegant structure tilting into the abyss, a small group of musicians is gathered near the entrance of the first-class lounge. They are led by the violinist, Wallace Hartley. There are 8 of them in total, dressed impeccably in their evening uniforms, their brass instruments gleaming faintly in the reflected light. Their decision, at this moment of absolute certainty and doom, was a profoundly simple, profoundly human one. They chose to play. Their music, a gentle stream of elegant waltzes, light opera selections, and hymns, was not an act of heroism designed for a newspaper headline. It was an act of grace, a quiet, sustained defiance against the terror that was rising from the engine rooms below. The melody floats into the tilted hallways, a soft, insistent whisper of normalcy. It is a strange, hypnotic comfort that reassures the nervous, settles the agitated, and gives dignity to those who have already accepted their fate. The music creates a small, warm bubble of civilization in the very heart of the unforgiving wild. Imagine that sound now, carrying across the calm, black surface of the ocean, a perfect, clear melody, entirely incongruous with the massive spectacle of a sinking liner. It is a final, tender farewell, delivered by 8 men who understood that their instruments offered a more powerful shield than any lifeboat. As the decks grow steeper and the confusion becomes harder to ignore, Hartley and his band continue their quiet work. They play until the very last possible moment, offering a final, peaceful cadence to the departing guests. The specific final piece is lost to history, but survivors often recalled the serene, heartbreaking notes of the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee," a melody that promised peace, even as the cold water crept closer. The sound eventually breaks, not in a grand finale, but when the deck angles too steeply for them to stand, or perhaps when the cold silence of the sea claims the air from their lungs. And then the music stops. The only sound left is the heavy, relentless whisper of the water. Dignity on a tilted deck. In the final, awful moments, the true character of the passengers revealed itself in quiet, extraordinary acts of resignation and love. This was not the hour of panic. It was the hour of decision. Many of the wealthiest and most powerful men of the age stood back, watching their wives and children step into the lifeboats. They had built the ship, they had paid for the ticket, and now they stood aside, choosing to face the consequence of their creation with a quiet, devastating humility. But among these silent, stoic figures, the enduring story of Ida and Isidor Strauss shines with a melancholy beauty. Isidor Strauss was the elderly co-owner of Macy's department store, a man of immense wealth and profound dignity.
Ida Strauss, however, looked at her husband, looked at the other women and children waiting, and shook her head. Her response was delivered with a quiet, final certainty. "I will not be separated from my husband. We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." The offer of a place in the lifeboat was then extended to her maid, whom Ida insisted take her place. She gave her maid her heavy fur coat, a gift against the terrible cold of the night, and with a final gentle nod, Ida walked back toward the interior of the ship, linking her arm through her husband's. They were last seen sitting together on a deck chair, silent, still, facing the enormous rising tide. Their choice was one of quiet, eternal fidelity, a declaration that in the face of death, the bond of love held greater value than the simple act of survival. It is a profoundly moving, sleep-inducing image, a couple wrapped in the stillness of their final moment, choosing to drift away from the noise and into the deep blue silence together. The deep blue silence. By 2:15 a.m., the time is measured only by the height of the black water against the portholes. The bow is completely submerged. The ship is tilted so steeply that the massive bronze propellers are entirely exposed to the icy air, shining faintly under the cold light of the stars. The sinking in this moment is not characterized by a loud, sudden crash. Instead, the great ship begins to slide into the depths. The weight of the flooded bow is too much for the immense structure to bear, and slowly, majestically, the Titanic makes her final, agonizing descent. For those few still watching from the scattered lifeboats, the spectacle is overwhelming in its quiet vastness. The final moments are filled with the soft, terrifying sound of implosion, the rush of compressed air exploding as the sea breaks through the decks, punctuated by the deep, heavy groans of tortured steel. It is the sound of the metal giving up its fight against the water, the final sigh of a dying giant. Then there is the devastating, absolute moment when the lights, which had burned so stubbornly bright throughout the entire ordeal, finally, irrevocably fail. At 2:20 a.m., the last current of electricity snaps. The Titanic is plunged into total, blinding darkness. She is no longer a ship. She is a shadow, a memory, dissolving into the freezing velvet of the night. The great vessel slips beneath the surface, leaving only behind the chilling sound of 1,500 souls struggling in the water, and above them, the silent, indifferent majesty of the heavens. The air temperature is around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. The sea temperature is 28 degrees, the freezing point of salt water. It is a cold that does not merely chill, it paralyzes. Look up now from the cold, turbulent water to the sky. The stars, countless and diamond-sharp, are reflected perfectly in the mill-pond sea. They are beautiful, distant, and utterly uncaring. They watched the ship sail, watched the music play, and watched the lights go out. They are the only enduring witnesses to the tragedy, frozen now above the wreck that will lie undisturbed on the ocean floor for 73 years. The great ship is gone. Only silence remains. Let that cold, quiet stillness wrap around you now. There is nothing left to fear from the dark. Rest now, deeply, under the freezing, beautiful stars.
The long, freezing night is nearly over. After the shattering silence that followed the Titanic's descent, the hours spent in the lifeboats were a continuous low murmur of cold and despair. The survivors floated in a tiny constellation of wooden shells, isolated islands in a vast, dark world, listening to the agonizing cries that slowly, one by one, faded into the silence. But time, relentless even on the darkest night, continues, and eventually the darkness gives way. Imagine now the slow, subtle shift in the sky above the eastern horizon. The stars, which had been so sharp and cold, begin to soften. The black velvet of the ocean slowly acquires a deep, bruised indigo hue. It is the arrival of a gray, hesitant dawn, revealing not the expected grandeur of the morning, but the chilling, empty truth of the sea. The sun rises over a vacant stretch of water, where the largest, most magnificent ship in the world had been. There is now only the Atlantic, utterly unchanged, indifferent, and vast. The ice field stretches to the horizon, sharp, jagged monuments of white against the morning light. And then, just as the sun fully clears the horizon, painting the sky with pale, icy colors, a new smudge of smoke is spotted on the edge of the world. It is the RMS Carpathia, a small Cunard liner that had raced through the night, pushing its boilers to the limit after receiving the faint, desperate distress calls. She arrives not to a scene of celebration, but to a silent, devastating aftermath. The rescue is slow, methodical, and profoundly somber. The passengers of the Carpathia line the rails, witnessing the sight that defies belief. The proud survivors, wrapped in blankets, faces pale with shock and cold, being hauled aboard. They bring with them the cold, awful truth of the night and the emptiness of the lifeboats, half-filled vessels now containing all that remains of the Titanic's promise. Captain Arthur Rostron of the Carpathia notes the glassy stillness of the water that had hidden the danger. He leads his ship through the area where the wreck lies, and there, amidst the floating debris of finely carved wood, shattered furniture, and personal effects, he sees the terrible evidence of the ice, a wide, continuous belt of white, jagged menace stretching as far as the eye can see. The Carpathia turns east, a small ship now carrying the crushing weight of a tragedy too enormous for its decks. As it sails away, the survivors look back at the empty, quiet ocean, leaving behind the true scale of the loss, the 1,500 souls resting on the dark floor, and the eternal silence that has claimed the spot. The enduring echo of pride. Decades have passed since that night in 1912. The wreck of the Titanic now rests in two massive pieces, 12,500 feet below the surface, shrouded in eternal darkness and silence. Yet our obsession with this single ship endures. Why? The Titanic remains, perhaps, the ultimate reminder of human hubris. It was a vessel built not just with steel, but with arrogance, the arrogance of the industrial age that believed technology had made nature obsolete. When the engineers stamped the word unsinkable onto the plans, they were defying the deep, quiet, immutable laws of the universe. The story is a timeless lesson delivered with a shock of ice and a terrifying noise of rending metal. No matter how high we build, how fast we travel, or how powerful we become, the silent, indifferent forces of nature will always command the final word. The ship stands as a monument to the price of forgetting our limits, but it also stands as a testament to the quiet dignity of humanity in the face of those limits, to the musicians who played for peace, to the men who stood back, and to the love that chose stillness over survival. The tragedy of the Titanic is no longer an event. It is an echo, a perpetual whisper in the dark,
reminding us that even the grandest dreams can vanish into the cold reality of a single fateful night. The journey is complete. The silence of the North Atlantic has settled. The echoes of the engines, the waltzes, and the distant rockets have all been absorbed back into the deep. Let the weight of this history, the stillness of the dark water, and the quiet dignity of the past drift away from you now. There is only the here and now, the comfort of your surroundings, and the peace of the deepest rest. Good night. Sleep soundly now, and leave the mysteries to the eternal silence of the sea.
If you enjoyed this astonishing, fact-filled, and mysterious historical journey, please give us a like. Our mission is to bring forth the mysterious, historical, and astonishing truths that may have been overlooked or incorrectly taught in traditional accounts. We uncover the realities that are often missing from standard history books. If you don't want to miss out on these kinds of historical, mysterious, and mind-boggling truths, then be sure to subscribe to our channel now.